Well, hey, y'all. Welcome to the When We Walk podcast. I'm Shireen.
I'm Micah.
And this is a podcast where we talk about the things we talk about when we walk.
All right. So, full transparency, lately,
Yeah.
we have not been walking a ton.
Not as much as we like to.
Usually. Yep.
Or sometimes we're walking separately
Yep.
because
That's
we're
true.
at different kids' things.
Yeah, different practices or whatever. Yep.
So I get your notification and I'll high five you.
Yep. It's always good. Yet last night you high-fived me
I did.
during a movie. You were in a movie.
I was in a very long movie.
Yes.
It's 3.5
I
hours.
can't believe you checked your notifications. But.
Well, it just popped up.
So last night we decided, A, we just needed a walk.
Yeah.
And B,
Our dog was crazy.
Yeah, our dog was crazy. And we just needed to talk about this.
Yeah.
So we went on a night walk.
Which was actually really nice.
It was a good night for it, yeah.
I mean, I don't normally love
No, we don't usually
evening
do
walks,
the night
but
walks.
that one
There's
was
usually
really
too
nice.
much going on. Yeah, it was nice. And we had a good, we actually, on the walk, talked about what do we usually talk about when we walk? Because we were just kind of wanting some ideas and some fresh things.
Yes, kind of stirring our hearts.
The thing that came to the surface was over 20 years of doing ministry, over the course of 20 years of doing ministry, but even longer, just being in relationship with people who know and love and follow Jesus. We've seen a lot of different stages of the faith journey.
Right.
We've not only lived in our lives, but also observed in other people's lives and walked with other people in different seasons. And one of the things we've seen over the many years is what is classically known right now as deconstruction.
Yeah. And we've talked about this because we've experienced it both personally in some of our friends' lives, like college friends.
Yeah.
Or, childhood friends.
Yeah.
And then now working in a church and in ministry, watching people in different seasons go through this process, some to the point of walking away from the faith.
Right.
It has been a source of conversation on our walks for years because we're both processing through it.
Yeah.
We're walking through emotions that we feel if it's someone close to us, and we're walking through what does this look like? What does it mean? How
do you help people?
Yeah, how do you help people? We're kind of walking through all the different angles of it, both as pastors and ministers of the gospel in the vocational setting of the church, but then also alongside friends.
Yeah.
People we've loved and walked with for years, and then all of a sudden, they have deconstructed. And that is a broad term.
Right.
So maybe to be helpful for people who are listening to this, whether you are walking alongside someone as a friend, or you have deconstructed, or as minister, right? Someone who is helping someone. I think just to unpack what deconstruction is.
Define it. Yeah. I don't think there's a Webster's definition of this. It's kind of just a way of understanding it. So this isn't perfect, but I think for our purposes, you could define it as the dismantling of a previously held belief.
Okay. This feels, I don't know. You have gone to seminary and you know more things than I do, but this feels now a newer buzzword to me. I feel like I've only heard people using it in the past 5 years.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it actually has older roots than that.
Okay.
That I think probably I think it was first kind of coined, I believe, in the 70s or 80s.
Really?
But I definitely think it has become more of a trend. And part of that is just because I think the phenomenon of social media and what it is, and one
all
person,
this information,
right? Yeah,
and you're hearing about other people's journeys,
exactly.
and it makes you question.
Yeah. So I think it was maybe coined then. If I remember correctly, I'd have to do I didn't do a lot of pre-research on that before this, but I do know that it is not a modern idea.
Okay.
Meaning people have deconstructed for all of time.
Okay.
That has been a normal part of life in relationship with God. And even in the context of the church, deconstruction has been an aspect of how the church has changed, grown at times, been transformed, been reformed at times.
So true.
And so I think you can understand it on a couple levels. One is, it's a dismantling of a previously held belief that kind of results in a different way of believing.
Okay.
And sometimes, though, it kind of, you deconstruct or dismantle to a point of unbelief.
Right.
And those are kind of two different paths that might have the same origin in terms of beginning to ask some hard questions, but where they lead can be different depending on how you process it.
We have seen people kind of walk both of those
yeah,
out.
Yeah.
And it's hard for different reasons. And I think another thing to think about is people start on this journey for so many different reasons. Yep. Some of it is maybe just a question that started a journey for them. Some is probably hurt, right? Like whether it's church hurt, someone in the church, a leader, another Christian, hurt them or disappointed them or whatever, and made them start kind of spiraling and questioning a lot of things.
Yeah.
Are there other reasons people might choose to deconstruct, you think?
I mean, I think there's a lot. I think there's maybe like experiencing life in a way that you weren't taught that it should be that way. You come across information that doesn't align with what you were taught. Yeah. And I would say it this way: it was an accepted but never trusted belief. So you had a belief in something that you never tested it. Accepted but never tested. And so because it was never tested, you just always held on to it. And then it becomes tested and you have to wrestle with it.
Yeah.
And it begins to take you down a journey. And that journey can actually lead to a reconstruction of a better way of seeing that particular issue, or it can lead to just a complete destruction.
Yeah. And
so, for instance, I was thinking, and I'd be curious to hear your answer to this too. What have we ever deconstructed? And the first thing that came to my mind, one of the biggest things that came to my mind was, I would say growing up, I grew up in the Methodist church where men and women could both have equal roles of leadership. Yeah. But I would say personally, I held more of what would be considered complementarian view, that men led in the church. I even remember, and part of that was just by example of what I had always seen. I even remember one pastor when I was probably in high school telling a sermon or giving a sermon about Esther and, Deborah. And him saying like, well, God will use women if no men rise up.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's one way to look at
it. Right. And so,
she wasn't chosen or anything.
Right. And so that was, that began to build a particular belief system in me. And then coming here to Lifegate and us going through our journey of rethinking women in leadership and the whole church. Yes. I mean, led by our elder board, we reconstructed our understanding of women in leadership because Lifegate, when it was Trinity, did not believe that women could be pastors or elders. And so as we began to rethink that theology, we did some deep dive work in it, read some great books, had some great counsel, and eventually landed somewhere completely different. That women could be pastors, women could be elders, and there is room for that in Scripture and all of that. So that's a healthy example of deconstruction, I believe, that leads to a reconstruction.
Yeah, that's a good one. I would say that's probably similar. I mean, I've read, this could be a whole nother podcast just talking about the whole women
one day leadership. You will teach us.
No, I'm not going to
You will teach us. You've got lots of thoughts.
But I read a bunch of books this summer, and I think I've mentioned that before because I wanted to go on it for myself. And it wasn't, for me, as much of maybe it was a form of deconstruction, reconstruction. I think it was more personal, like, I just agreed with and believed as a church leadership the path how we got to where we got. But I think just more personally, I was like, wait, no, I want to know for myself. I want to have my own kind of understanding and answers and see it clearly in Scripture for myself. And so even you bring up that question makes me think how many people probably just live life like you grow up in an understanding of a belief, and then you do kind of come to a personal place of, wait, because you're faced with it, right? I came on staff as a woman pastor, and you're more faced with something, you need to go on your own personal journey for it.
Yeah. Yep.
The hope is, and of course I didn't do mine in a closet by myself. I'm like talking to you.
Yeah.
I'm asking you, you know what books I'm reading. I'm making sure I'm not reading too many crazy off the wall things. I'm trying to stay in the healthy streams of learning on both sides of something. And I guess that can also be what it could be more the scary or danger side when someone maybe in the church hears, oh, so-and-so is deconstructing. I know there are a lot of people who that is like now a red flag when you hear that word.
Yeah.
And instead it's like, oh, okay, well, I wonder what, instead maybe our response should be, I wonder what questions brought them to a place of wanting to go down that road. Like for me, it was a personal encounter of like, okay, now I'm a pastor on staff. I need to go on this journey for myself. And so I wonder how many people get to that place. They're confronted with something more personal.
Yeah.
Not just, like you said, you've just been taught it. And you come to that. It's like confronting, and you want to know, do you really believe this?
Yes, that's where I think that's the testing. So I think for many people it is that, like, it's just an untested belief.
Yeah.
That they picked up somewhere along the way that once it's tested, they have to think into it. They have to deep dive. And sometimes you land at the same place and sometimes you land somewhere different, but you have to go through through a process of kind of dismantling in order to really look at all the pieces and then put it back together. I think there are other versions, though. There's people who experience hard things in life, experience some suffering, and so they question the character of God, right?
Yeah, so talk about that for a minute, because I feel like that's what we've seen a lot with people. Yeah. Right? Like they've been disappointed by something. Yeah. And maybe they point to their disappointment of like, God let me down. Yep. This isn't who he's supposed to be or whatever. Right. And then they start derailing. Why is that?
I mean, I think I think maybe a view of God that we had, and I think this is very normal, but maybe even growing up, for people who grew up in the church, you have a view of God, and in kids' church, you're not talking a lot about suffering. That's you're not talking a lot about prayers that don't seem to get answered. You're not talking about that. You're
just
kind of
learning
stuff.
like Bible stories,
the hard facts of
right?
life. Yeah. And so I think you can go into life, and then when life doesn't work out the way you think it should or you expected it to, as someone who has faith in the goodness of God and the love of God, when life gets hard, it can naturally cause you to question that. Yeah. It can naturally cause you to question, is God actually good? Is God loving? Or even, is God real? Like, is this whole thing just a facade, something we've created to make ourselves feel better?
I think some people in the church are afraid of people who ask those questions and who struggle. Yeah. Because like when we watch someone walk through suffering, we want to be the people that, I think maybe this is more of a Western thing, you think? We want to be the people to like bring hope. Like, no, God is still good. No, there's hope on the other side. We don't sit in suffering very well. That could also be a whole nother conversation. And so what happens is, I wonder if, I feel like it maybe kind of closes that person off to wanting to be able to share where they are asking some really hard questions about God. And is he good? And we went through those questions within minutes of your stroke in the hospital room. Right. I mean, I went through all those questions in my head. I mean, I'm sure you did too, know, and I think if you hear someone kind of squash your questions and squash where you might even be doubting, that's not a word we like to use in the church, then you can hold on to it and you go into an internal process. Maybe you're not processing out loud with people you don't feel safe to, and you can start deconstructing honestly unhealthily, right? Yep. Like by yourself in isolation, using resources that probably aren't as helpful, and stuck with these disappointments and questions. Instead, what should be healthy is to be able to bring it to the church and to be community around you, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think deconstruction that leads to reconstruction is often done in kind of the healthy processing of, I would say, honesty and humility. That's honesty meaning I can ask these questions. I can be real about what I'm thinking, what I'm wrestling with, what I'm not believing right now. And also humility, both the person sharing and the person listening, to have, soft soil in the conversation, so that there can be a willingness to push, to prod a little bit, to ask hard questions, to sit and listen, like you're saying, and maybe not have all the answers, but just let the person ask the questions and hold that uncertainty before God. I think in that kind of a setting, deconstruction can lead to healthy reconstruction.
Yeah.
You think about even like, you were bringing this up, Jesus, like he was
that is kind of what he came and did.
Deconstructor and a reconstructor, right?
He did that.
Yeah, I mean, he brought a message of a kingdom that did not fit the religious narrative of his day or the political narrative of his day. Both the Jewish and the Roman systems did not fully align with this new kingdom that Jesus was bringing to the surface. And so in much of what he taught, he was deconstructing a formerly held belief and reconstructing something different in place of that. And it's really cool to see, like, so how was that done in a healthy way? The disciples would sit around and ask Jesus, like, help me understand.
Yeah.
Like, what did you mean by that? Like, what are you trying to do? What are you about? And so rather than resisting him, as some people did, the disciples were the ones who leaned into him.
They were more inquisitive with him.
In the midst of the doubt or the confusion or this doesn't seem to make sense.
That's good.
They were the ones who leaned in.
Yeah. That's really good. It does make me think like the Sermon on the Mount, where every time he like says he's like breaking down an old law.
You have heard that it was said.
Yeah, you have heard that it was said.
But I tell you.
But I'm here to tell you this. And that's basically just a deconstruction statement.
And then reconstruction. But I'm here to tell you. And then that gets absorbed into the hearts of his followers through, again, healthy community, honesty and humility. Mm-hmm. Lord, help us understand.
Yeah.
Lord, what did you mean by that? And the back and forth of, I just imagine the nights around the fire.
Oh, I'm sure.
Of him answering their questions. And they were not the ones who ran away. They weren't the ones who said, this is too hard of a teaching for us, and so we're gonna abandon him. They were the ones who, when so many did, said, we'll sit around the fire with you and help us understand what you're doing.
Yeah.
And I think when people are in a place of deconstruction, they're doubting, they're hurting, they're questioning, they're wondering, for us as a church to create that around the fire atmosphere.
Yeah, that's
better.
better.
Where they can ask questions and where we can sit with them and try and answer those questions, or at least just be with them.
What do you think I always think of the person who, so for a lot, not all of, but a lot of the people who we've known or seen walk through a deconstruction, a lot of times they won't come to us until they're almost like they've either walked away or they've completely shifted on something and are like, I no longer believe this. I'm going to start, some of it is okay. They're going to go to a different denomination or a different church because they believe and align with this. And that, it is what it is. But I am always a little bit, I think that's why for some believers, when you hear the word deconstruction, it kind of like makes you like resist it a little bit or get nervous, because you're not, I think for me, when those situations have happened for us, I'm always like, oh, why didn't you invite us in the process? Mm-hmm. Like, we would have loved to have these hard conversations with you before you kind of all the way got to that position. Mm-hmm. And then you came back and said this. Yeah. Like, and I know we always would land on, so help me understand how you got there. But I think that's why so many believers, when they hear of someone who is walking a path or started deconstructing or did deconstruct, like, there is this sense of, I would have loved to have been in that process with you, maybe. And so I wonder if what it does is makes you a little more nervous the next time, and you are maybe more resistant. Not resistant, but like, it is harder to have those conversations, like around a fire or whatever. Do you know what I mean?
As the listener?
Yeah. Yes, as the listener, as the person whose friend is walking that, or family member or whatnot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know. I think we'd probably have to ask those people, who didn't want to process. Maybe they just didn't want to process with us, or maybe
that's true.
maybe there was a different set of people they were processing with. I don't know. But we have seen that kind of progression. And I think what often happens when someone begins to ask questions is they will oftentimes immediately surround themselves with those who might already be where they think they're going.
Oh, that's true.
And they maybe fail to listen to those who have been with them up to that point. And so I think that's where church hurt gets in, because if church hurt is kind of the origin point of deconstruction, there's a trust issue there. There's a, I can't go back to the people who I have been with because they hurt me. So I need to find a new community. And I think for other people, it can just be more, I don't know that I want to get into an argument because I know what they're going to say. They're going to try to pull me back to what we've always taught, or what we've always thought to be right. And so I want to press a little bit further into what could be true. I think in that scenario, wisdom says to have both voices in your life. Right.
I mean, that's what I think, but.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so I don't know. I can't say all the reasons why, someone might not choose to do that. But I do think if for the person who's listening to this, who's going through any kind of a deconstruction on a particular issue, I think wisdom would say, listen to people from many perspectives. Don't just go ahead and, align with one before you've done the work.
Or assume that is where you will land, maybe, like you said.
Yeah.
I also think we have to be wise, and this goes back to another conversation we had of like, the enemy could be in this. There is healthy ways to deconstruct and reconstruct, but the enemy can also have a heyday of twisting things and want to divide us, want to keep us in the place of hurt, want to divide us from other believers, want to pull us completely away from, divide us from God. And so I think we can't be blind to the fact that he can twist some of the process of this.
That's true. So a great question to ask when you're going through the process or watching someone go through the process. I mean, Jesus talks so often about, you will know a tree by its fruit. What fruit is this process producing?
Oh, that's really good.
Because we've seen some people who deconstruct maybe a particular aspect of their faith, or they kind of deconstruct away from a particular stream of the church. So maybe they were very charismatic and they kind of shift towards liturgical, or they were very liturgical and they shift towards more of a, kind of a contemporary worship, that kind of thing. I think in situations like that, you can look at the fruit and maybe say, this is better fruit. Like, I feel like I'm connecting with Jesus more deeply. I feel like I'm walking with him more intimately. I feel like I'm having grace to follow his ways more closely. I think the other version of that is you begin to deconstruct beyond just certain aspects of your belief system, but the whole thing begins to dismantle. And I think one way to know where is this going is again, look at the fruit. Are you becoming more loving? Are you becoming more grace-filled?
So good. Yeah.
Do you feel like you have more hope? Do you feel like you have more joy? Do you feel like you have more faith? Like, are these things increasing in your life? If they're not, then it could be that you're maybe going through the process of deconstructing some things, but you're not reconstructing better truth. I mean, the goal is to get to what is true. Yep. And what is truly the kingdom of God communicated through the gospel of Jesus Christ. Yep. I mean, that's the goal, is to get to the truest version of that. And so the truer the version, I believe, the more good fruit it will produce in your life.
That's good.
And so there are some people, for instance, who I think they might get frustrated about something in the church. And so they kind of want to question it, rethink it. But it produces in them such a critical spirit towards the church that I think you would have to ask the question, is Jesus behind this? Is the enemy behind this? Is it your flesh? Is it something else? But then there are many others who ask a question about the church and it actually can motivate. Hey, maybe we need to get better in this area. Maybe we need to grow in this area. Maybe this isn't the right place for you to worship. Maybe you kind of need to worship over here in this other context, then it'll be more life-giving for you. And in that, it can be a really beautiful thing. It can be a really wonderful thing.
Oh man, I feel like we could go on so many more bunny trails of that
we
one, because so many thoughts just went through my head, but I'm not even gonna bring them up.
Okay.
But the first thought I had was, I think the people who are walking through this, I think the biggest piece, maybe if you're personally walking through this, is don't run from community.
Yeah.
I think that's really, really important. And to not be afraid of the questions they have. Right? Like some questions are good to ask, and we need to. I was just reading before we came here about how, I think it's Walter Brueggemann, is that how you say his name?
Yeah.
Talks about how the Psalms are all about like disorientation and like reorientation, maybe. And I think you see that, right? Like David wrestled with, is God still good? Because I'm being defeated and taken down right now. And I think that's why I love the Psalms. I always go back to them, because it speaks to what our felt needs are. And we see it in action in how he is wrestling with God on some things. And then I always love it because he always lands, almost always lands on, but God, you are faithful, you are good, you are loving, you take the best care of me, I trust you. But you watch his journey, and he is literally all over the place. And I mean, I know that might be a different wording, the idea of disorientation and reorientation. Is it similar?
The same concept, okay. Yeah. I mean, I think, every significant growth point in our faith is a process of orientation, disorientation, reorientation.
Okay.
I mean, the world as we know it, the world gets disrupted, but then it gets put right again, better than it was. And so we have a worldview about a particular thing. We have, that thing is tested. And then if we cling to God, and if we stay in community, that thing can be rebuilt with a more true and beautiful version of itself. And I think the Psalms is a great place to see that progression happening over and over again.
I do too.
In David's life. I also think for the person who has a friend going through some version of deconstruction, Jude 22 says, "Be merciful with those who doubt."
Oh, that's good.
And I think as a church, we
need that reminder.
We need it. Like, I think as a church, we have not done well here. We have, somebody asks a hard question, and
it can feel like a challenge.
Yeah, or it can just be our fear of like, oh my gosh, if you ask that question, that means you don't believe in Jesus, which means you're going to hell, and you better get off that path and on the right path.
Or you're starting to align over here, and we don't want you to go that way.
Right. And so I think being merciful with those who doubt, learning how to, it's helped me understand. It's asking good questions. It's listening. It's not feeling like you have to have all the answers. I remember talking to a guy one time who was going through quite a process of just total deconstruction of faith, like the whole thing. And I remember him asking me one time, is there anything that you doubt? Like, is there anything you're not certain about?
Yeah.
And me sharing the things that I'm not so sure about actually reassured him.
Yeah.
Like this sense of like, you don't,
it.
And I think sometimes as Christians, we have we feel this need to have all the answers. Even Jesus didn't give all the answers.
No, he didn't.
He often responded to questions with questions, or he
responded
to questions with like statements that, you really have to think about to figure out what exactly he was trying to say.
Yeah.
So I think being merciful with those who doubt, learning how to, and not to say like, that shouldn't sound like, it's belittling people who are asking questions like, oh, they're doubting. We just need to pat them on the head and like, that's not at all what I'm saying. Being merciful is to recognize like there's probably something at the root of this that's personal, that's painful, that's confusing. And can you maintain the relationship long enough to see if that comes to the surface, to see if you can be there when, if and when that comes to the surface.
I also think maybe as believers sometimes are we fearful when someone like starts questioning? Maybe there's a personal like fear of they are going to whatever. I don't know. It's going to start to, other people are going to start feeling that and asking those questions. Don't, let that get out. Or does it feel threatening to us? I actually think that a lot of people think that maybe it threatens their personal faith. And that's where I have to say, like, no, wait, what are you personally, where are you grounded in your own faith and your walk? Because someone else's doubts and questions and hurt should never threaten our faith.
Yeah.
And in fact, what it should do, and if we're doing it well, like you said, the being merciful, I see it as like I'm opening up myself and saying, I want to lean in with you. Where can I lean in with you and journey with you and ask questions with you and just sit with you in those. And I probably won't have all the answers, like you said, but I want to walk with this with you.
Yeah. That's really good. So if you're the questioner, if you're the one asking the questions, stay in community.
Yes.
And if you're the one knowing someone who's asking the questions, you're the listener, be merciful.
Yeah.
Be grace-filled. Learn how to just sit and be a part of their life and their journey.
I think that's good.
Yeah.
Hopefully that's helpful.
Yeah. And maybe we should have some more conversation around this.
I think there were a lot of directions
7 different directions we could have
gone
gone. I can see your brain
but
working
we'll just
while you're talking.
keep it right there for now.
Yeah. That's great.
Okay. So what are we wearing? Okay. I'm going to give some background to this. What we're wearing, because a lot of people love your shoe game.
Oh, okay.
And
are you sure they don't judge it?
I don't know if they are or not, but some of the people that I've talked to, they always like, there are families like parents and kids who are driving to church and they're like, I wonder what shoes Micah's going to be preaching in this
really?
week.
Wow. Okay.
Yes.
All
So
right.
What are you wearing?
Right now,
in this moment,
I'm wearing these gray and white Jordan 1s.
Okay.
And I've always wanted a pair of Jordan 1s. My world was opened to the beauty of owning some Jordans. In 2019, I'd wanted a pair my whole life. And
okay, you got to tell the backstory real quick.
Yes. I don't want to take up too much time. I don't know how boring it is, but I had a friend who always got the new Jordans every year in the 80s. And my parents refused to spend that much money on shoes, which was understandable.
Yeah.
They're reasonable people. And so he would let me come over to his house and watch him open.
It was an unboxing before unboxings were a thing.
Totally. Yep. And he would slip them on, and I would just look at them and lust over them.
Oh,
and
my
so
goodness.
ever since Jordans were in their origins, I had always wanted a pair. And in 2019, a friend gave me a pair.
I know.
And
it was
and it kind of just opened me up to wanting some or to wanting more, I should say.
Yep, it sure
it's
did.
Like it just
Open
cracked that desire open. And so I just got these this summer, and I think they might be my favorite.
You wear
pair
those,
of Jordans.
I feel like, the most.
Yeah.
And now you've opened the door for our children.
Yes.
Except we are not funding their shoe game.
No.
They have to fund their own shoe game.
They're motivated to get jobs now.
They
and
are.
to work and make money.
It's great.
It's an upside to that.
Yep.
What about you? Are you wearing anything special?
I don't even know the brand of shoes I have on my feet.
Yes, somebody gave you those, right?
No, she saw them in the store and said, do you want these? And I said, yes, I do. And
I didn't hear that
them.
part of it. I thought you said,
I purchased
when you said
them.
she got me these, I thought you meant. Okay.
She got them and I paid her back.
Gotcha. Nice.
But I had been wanting them for a long time.
They're
I think
very
they're
cool.
a
I
knockoff
like
of some famous designer type shoe.
Yeah.
But a TJ Maxx version, which I love.
The Duke game these days is
I know.
It's really all you need.
And I know there are other women who are more in the shoe game like you than I am, but I'll just stick to my little cute TJ Maxx and Target shoes for now.
They're great. That's awesome. All right. Well, what a great conversation. Hopefully that was helpful for those of you that joined us, and we look forward to being with you next time on When We Walk.